I'm Walter Cronkite. For almost 100 years now, the history of radio has been written by America's inventors and tinkerers. Amateur radio operators, hams, were the dreamers of the electronic age. They gave us hi-fi audio, AM and FM radio, even television itself. They not only brought us a new world of inventions, they started a hobby that soon turned into a full-fledged radio service. In return, the federal government allotted them frequencies, places in the radio spectrum to pursue their passion. Over the years, those frequencies have become more valuable than money. No longer, it seems, will the future of electronics and communications be written by the dreamers, though. No. More likely, amateur radio's future will be dictated by bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., prompted by big money interests. Jim Haney is an amateur radio operator and the president of the National Organization for Amateur Radio, the ARRL.
We've got to have a high visibility, a high level of recognition amongst lawmakers and also with the FCC.
The Federal Communications Commission is the agency that issues ham licenses and regulates amateur radio. Congress created the FCC, and like a mindful parent, it occasionally overrules the agency, a fact of which Jim Haney is well aware. That's important because at this exact moment, the FCC is pushing a controversial Internet access scheme called Broadband over Power Line, or BPL. BPL sounds great in theory, but at test sites around the country it has proven to be a disaster for police, fire departments, airlines, shortwave listeners, and hams. Now, what if the government just said to the millions of people who use radio for long-distance two-way communications, look, you just don't need those frequencies. Just use your cell phone or get on the internet, use your computer. Why bother with old technology like radio? Here's why. Sometimes simpler is simply better. It's been said before, but it's worth repeating. Ham radio is truly the only fail-safe communication system in the world. Look what happened on February 1st, 2003, when the Space Shuttle Columbia broke up on re-entry from space and scattered parts all over Texas and Louisiana. What one group was essential to the search? The Forest Service, the FBI, the Texas Rangers? Well, they all helped, certainly, but it was the hundreds of volunteer ham radio operators who made it possible for all those agencies to talk to each other. They could not have, because each federal, state, and local agency uses a different radio frequency, and cell phones were useless in the Texas Hill Country. So radio amateurs were key and critical.
This net control, go ahead, Jake.
Net control, be advised those 6 NASA engineers have not made it to the rally point.
Here's what Robert Hurst, the Emergency Management Coordinator for Nacogdoches County, said.
We have made amateur radio operators such an integral part of our emergency management plans and preparation plans prior to this that they very quickly and very seamlessly integrated into the actual response to the incident.
Radio amateurs facilitated the search and made it work. But once the emergency was over, the federal agencies went back to business as usual. The hams were out of sight and out of mind. So when the broadband over power line issue came before the FCC, the ARRL had no other choice but to go to Washington. Jim Haney had to help. Derek Riker watches Congress, tracks legislation, and keeps the ARRL informed.
There's hundreds of thousands of amateur radio operators throughout the country, and there's nearly 1,000 in almost every congressional district at least. Those numbers give a lot of clout to the issues that we come up here to lobby about.
This day, the issue is broadband over power line. First stop was a visit to Mike Ross, a sympathetic representative from Arkansas.
Let me make it clear, we're not against broadband. We think everybody should have an opportunity to have it. It's just this particular technique of bringing it to the public, I think, is a flawed technique. There's the box that puts the signal on the power line. And what happens is in the line acts as an antenna. You can hear all the little birdies up and down that's on the 20-meter band. That's all you hear.
Jim points out the interference isn't limited to amateur radio, but also to some police and fire frequencies.
So public safety in, say, El Dorado, Arkansas is still using 47 megahertz. That's what they're going to hear.
BPL, of course, isn't the only issue before Congress. In the offices of Representative Michael Bilirakis of Florida, the discussion is about the Spectrum Protection Act. This would guarantee that if the FCC takes frequencies away from the amateur service, it must give back frequencies in another part of the radio spectrum.
We know that the FCC opposes the bill. I suppose the reason is they don't want Congress telling them what to do.
Another topic was ham volunteers.
If we were to put a dollar value for each hour of volunteer work that amateur radio has done for the whole nation across the country, it'd probably amount to the billions of dollars.
Any history that you have in that regard to supplement and to complement somewhat 9/11, those days and whatnot, can only be very helpful.
Congressman Greg Walden of Oregon is another ham. He's in a hurry on his way to a floor vote.
I had an interesting meeting with some power folks on that broadband.
I'm curious about what happened on that.
And, they're telling me they've got some technical capabilities to shield and all.
Right.
And I've been working with
the
radio guys.
I'm not from Missouri, but show me.
Meeting over, Walden had to run back to the House chamber and take part in a roll call vote. There are 24,872 registered lobbyists on Capitol Hill vying for Congress's attention. So when Jim Haney and the ARRL go to Washington, that's what they're up against. But according to Senator Michael Crapo of Idaho, there is a shortcut to get the attention of your congressman or senator, and it is within every voter's reach.
There are literally hundreds of issues, and every senator and every member of Congress focuses on those issues which their constituency tells them are of importance to them. And that's why my job in getting attention on amateur radio issues is significantly aided when the amateur radio operators around the country will simply get engaged and contact their members of Congress.
So there's the message. Ordinary citizens must get involved. We really, can orchestrate change. The ARRL has been down this road before and has succeeded on behalf of all amateurs. What about BPL? Well, in the end, politics won. The FCC ignored the scientific evidence and authorized broadband over power line anyway. But it is a tribute to the ARRL that it has succeeded in obtaining safeguards. It ensured that amateur radio operators and other spectrum users are protected from harmful interference. And it persuaded commission members to require the quick resolution of interference cases. You may not always agree with the ARRL, but the League does deserve credit for always representing the interests of amateur radio. The ARRL needs our support now to preserve amateur radio for the future. I'm Walter Cronkite, amateur radio operator, KB2GSD, and that's the way it is.
This is WA0EYJ, Salvation Army Net Control.
West Creek Fire, K0HBZ.
It appears to have jumped the fire line and the backburn that they did yesterday. Smoke is becoming rather intense, and the ash that's falling out has gotten more intense also. Over.
The fire is just right over this ridge here behind me,
It's starting to get close. WB0TUB.
Well, the sheriff came through a few minutes ago and advised to stand by to evacuate at a moment's notice.
Roger, copy. And telephone status unchanged?
Roger, no telephone.
If I had not been a ham radio operator, I don't think I could have been anywhere near as effective as I have been. It has just been a blessing.
Amen.